Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are your award-winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast, and we return with a cavalry and a doctor in store to hopefully give us some uplifting feels ahead of Spurs back in action. Although, like I say, at the moment, we are in the midst of an international break. I'll let you wonderful people decide if that's a good or a bad thing. Joining me on this Last Word on Spurs, I'm joined by Jason McGovern, Richard Cracknell, Ricky J. Norwood returning to the panel. And my God, we've got a doctor. We've got a doctor. And this man is going to hopefully give us some therapy. Although, to be fair, we go to therapy, it feels like, on a weekly, bi-weekly basis with what's going on in our lives with Tottenham Hotspur. Joining us on this Last Word on Spurs is...
Ali. Bloody hell, Ali. There you go.
The wonderful Alasdair Gold returns. Al, thank you so much for your time. They're dropping off already. How are you? Lovely to have you here. You well?
Yeah, no, I'm good. Honestly, when you talk about the doctor, I'm like looking around, wondering, like, is that Jace's kind of new nickname? What, who's the doctor? It's great to be back. Honestly, as I always say, it's the one podcast I kind of do each season, and always enjoy it. It's always great fun.
Bless you. Really, really do appreciate it. And like I say, you join us at a time where it's always the way. Spurs have just come off the back of a defeat heading into an international break, which, you know what, we seem to be really, really unlucky in terms of the timings of these international breaks. It feels just as we're hitting a bit of form, bang, there comes a speed bump. And I think, like I say, as Spurs fans, we've become accustomed to, having to stick with the process. And obviously, we know it's a transitional season. But I think it's fair to say that this is probably, I would say, the most I've seen divided at times in recent years about Spurs. I just feel that we're at a point where we really want to love a manager. And I think some are really hell-bent that they feel Postecoglou is the right man, whereas some are definitely questioning that for sure. And I think that's what makes football great. There's so many different opinions out there. There's so many different, obviously, people that have their different views. And what makes this incredible show, I think, so special is that we get wonderful guests on that all have different views and feelings about Spurs. And that's what we do in terms of coming together and discussing them. So, look, let's go around very quickly. Jace, before we get into anything, how are you? Love to see you back on. Have you enjoying the break, Jace?
No. Well, I've been watching the cricket most of the day, so England have been smashing runs galore. I've watched Joe Root break a record, so yeah, I'm quite enjoying it at the moment.
Bless you, love to be back on. Rick, thank you so much for your time. Rick, you are one of the guys on here that always does give us optimism, hope and belief. I know you're one that always backs the team. Yeah. How are you feeling at the moment about things?
Oh, listen, bro, I'm always positive, man. Yet, even after a negative result, I always try and find the positive in it. And I think we're on the right track. I really do. But obviously, we're going to get in. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be back on with you, gents. And the man, the myth, the legend that is Ali Gold. So I can't wait to jump in.
Oh, man. Look likewise. So do definitely agree with that one. And listen, he knows the introduction. Richard Cracknell is back. Cracks, how are you?
Very well, Rick. Find myself back in the UK till tomorrow. Then home again. Get out this this weather. Go and get my shorts back on. Home for a week. Back for 2 weeks. Home for a week. Back for 2 weeks. Like Judith Chalmers, isn't I? Evening, kids. Judith. Ask your granddad. Judith Chalmers.
Bro, it looks like they're giving you the cupboard under the stairs here. What's going on?
I reckon it's more Clive James crackers than Judith Chalmers.
Well, I'm sat next to a mirrored wardrobe, and I think on the biggest picture you can see, and somebody said it looks like I'm sat next to my twin, as if one of me is not enough because I can't stand me. Imagine if there was two of us.
I did keep thinking, who is that person that keeps moving at the same time you're moving? I'm thinking, what is going on there?
Yeah,
but we've got you. We've got you.
Look. Yeah, and you ain't got to put up with two of me now.
We love you. We do love you. Two of you. God, what would I do with myself? I tell you, we'd have a lot of fun. Guys, I say, as always, thank you so much for your support for the show. And like I say, look, we wanted to be bringing you an upbeat show. Hopefully the show will reflect the realism of where things are. And like I say, we're keen to get Ali's thoughts on what he's made of the season so far. And obviously hope for what's to come. Obviously, Spurs are still, as I recalled and we recall, still battling on all four fronts. And Jason knows how much that means to me, being on all four fronts in terms of the cup competitions. It's what it's all about. It's what it's all about. That was going to go somewhere else then for a second. I thought, where am I going to go with that? Quickly rescue that as quick as we can. We are going to discuss where we are in terms of Formula 1. But before we do, I want to ask Ali about Ryan Mason, if we don't mind. Al, there's been reports that Ryan potentially could become the new Anderlecht manager. And a friend of the show, Paul O'Keefe, has indicated to us that Mason is hopeful Anderlecht can reach agreement with Spurs. And Jan Vertonghen's even put in a good word for Ryan. So I appreciate this one is still currently in process and we are still waiting for further news. But I suppose the question to ask you is, do you think that's a good move for Ryan if it is to go through?
I think it's a big move. It's a big first job to take on, Anderlecht. I'm sure we'll have seen Vincent Kompany and seen what it's done to his managerial career. Obviously, Burnley, Bayern Munich, and all of that. But yeah, I mean, even in the Belgian league, he can just talk to Matty Wells about that, and the Club Brugge with Scott Parker, and how that kind of went in completely opposite direction. It's a big one. It really is. It's a bit of a risk, but then also if he pulls it off and it's a success in the role, because they've been struggling. I think they're in 4th place at the moment. Sacked their manager a month ago. He's kind of in a position where he can go in and improve things. And yeah, Jan Vertonghen, having a mate there's never a bad thing. Someone that can kind of be his voice among the players as well. And yeah, from what I've told, he's in those kind of final stages as one of the leading candidates, and certainly there's a lot of interest from Anderlecht in him. He's always been very highly rated. I did a little piece yesterday. I was kind of looking back at his spells at Spurs, and the first spell results-wise was very good when you kind of look back at it overall. Of course, people will look at the final where they lost 1-0 to City, but actually overall, he won the bulk of the remaining matches. Second spell, not as good, but a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff that he did kind of paved the way for Ange to come into a less fractured and divisive or divided club. So he's always retained this kind of real high rating among kind of people in the game, really. And I also think that last summer, getting in Nick Montgomery and Sergio Raimondo coming in, it almost allowed, I don't know, a little bit of latitude, I suppose, if he did find a job to go off and get it, because the coaching staff, if he were to leave, it kind of goes back to the numbers it was last season anyway. So, yeah, massive move for him if he's the one that eventually gets the job. And it's a big risk, but this is the game of football now. Young coaches they've got to nail it on their first attempt, really. Otherwise, they kind of sink without a trace, don't they?
Just a final one on there, Al, before we do move on. Do you think, in a world that he does move on, that Ange looks to seek a replacement for his current position, or do you think he'll go with what he's got in terms of the current coaching staff there? Difficult to answer, but just maybe a hypothetical one if it does go through. Yeah,
I mean, like I said, I think the numbers kind of go back to what they were last season. I think there's a lot of experience there in Montgomery and Raimondo. They've, they've been a manager and assistant duo at 2 different clubs now. So, and we're seeing the little influences of Montgomery with the set pieces and things like that as well. So, yeah, I mean, you can never rule it out, but I would imagine in terms of numbers, it wouldn't be the biggest need to replace him. But yeah, I'm sure Andrew will let us know if he does head off.
I'm sure he will. Like I say, that news, like I say, is currently as we stand at the moment. Very much as this podcast does go out, there might be a change in that, so we shall see. We'll just get a feel on that very, very quickly if we can, round the panel. Just a couple of words on it. Jason, for you, like I say, Ryan Mason, for some reason there feels sometimes, among the fan base that maybe to some degree they were surprised that he did stay on under and he didn't go and seek that opportunity. Do you think for what he's learned under the likes of Conte, Mourinho, obviously Nuno as well, you got to add in there, do you think it's a good move for Ryan if he does go through?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's reached a stage where for his own kind of reputation, particularly amongst the Spurs base, he needs to go and have a crack at full time, because every time he comes in as a caretaker, it's just written off as, it's want to leave his men, and it's too matey and too pally. So there's nothing he can do to change that perception. He's been at Tottenham, and he's coached at Tottenham, and he's a Tottenham lad. But you can't, he can't help his background, can he? So I think for him to forge a reputation, then definitely he needs to. And the thing is with Anderlecht, it's a good profile club. It's a club that will have expectations to go and win things and things like that. They're used to that culture. We've played them a couple of times in Europe. They're a good side as well. So I think it's a great move for him, and hopefully everything works out for him. And maybe he'll be back in a couple of years' time.
I mean, that's the interesting, isn't it? In terms of if he does at some point do return to the football club. We'll go to Rick's actually. Rick's, your feeling on that Ryan Mason potential move to Anderlecht? Is that a good thing for him in terms of personal progression at this point?
I think it's a fantastic thing for him. I think he's done so well over the years. You can see he's got a clear idea of what his style of football is. And I think both times when he took over as caretaker, you know, we were seeing some really bad football at those points. And regardless of results, he did try and bring an attacking way back. He did try and bring, you know, a Tottenham way back in. And I think he's learned a lot of good things, but also a lot of bad things, what not to do as well. But you can see the ambition of him to even kind of go for his first club, to go to somewhere like Anderlecht and kind of go play a trade and go be under that pressure. I think he's excited by that, and I wish him all the best. I think he's going to be a fantastic manager for what he's seen at Spurs, which is the roller coaster. We as fans, you know what I mean? We go through it every single week, and Ali goes through it every single week. But like for him as a kind of a player and a coach now and a caretaker manager, he's seen so much at Tottenham. So I wish him well, man. And I think it's a fantastic move for him.
Yeah, like I say, if it does happen. Cracks, final one to you. We've seen many different coaching staff come and go at this football club. Do you think Ryan goes with a lot of the best wishes? Because, like I say, he's been here and he's taken the reins at times where it hasn't been easy. You know, again, you look at the fact that he took over at the Carabao Cup final against Guardiola. We took them really to late in that game where things could have, like I say, gone to potential extra time and penalties. I mean, how do you think he will be, I say remembered, but how do you think he will be received if this news does go through?
Well, Rick, you know I love a silly analogy. And look, Ryan Mason, I've met on a couple of occasions, and he is a really, really good guy. He's, first off, forget football. I always judge even footballers on what they're like as people. And he is a really solid, good guy, really good guy. So every time Spurs have asked him to come in, literally the club's been set on fire. They've set it like the club's been set on fire, and they turn around to Ryan Mason and they go, oh, sorry, Ryan, we've set fire to the club again for one reason or another. Have you got an extinguisher and a couple of buckets of water? Maybe if you can put this fire out. And he's turned up and he's thrown some water on it, or he's attempted to. Now, social media will tell you, oh, you've burnt the club down. Like, well, hang on, I was the only one that was prepared to turn up and actually pour a bucket of water on it and give it a go at putting the fire out. So it's as simple as that. So, you know, the situations that he's come into the club to come and caretake and manage, it was at times when the optics of it was absolutely terrible. But he's stepped up and he's come in and he's tried to do something. So, you know, whether you like Ryan Mason or not, or whether you think he'll actually make a great manager, he has at least turned up with his hose and a bucket of water and tried to put the fire out or tried to do something about it. You know, he's trying to stamp on the fire. So, Listen, make no doubts about it. He's Tottenham through and through. Absolutely Tottenham through and through. He loves that club. He absolutely loves Tottenham Hotspur. So for that alone, you just got to say to him, good luck. Go and learn your craft. You'll make loads of mistakes. I remember there was I can't remember who the manager was that got sacked a while ago. It might be somebody like Richie Wellens at Orient. And I think he got sacked from somewhere and he bumped into Neil Warnock. Now, he is a man that's been a manager for 112 years. And he was absolutely on his chin strap because he'd been sacked. And Neil Warnock said to him, come on, soft lad. He went, you're not a manager until you've been sacked at least 6 times. And that's the life of managing and coaching in football. You go and take a job, you mess it up in places, you do well, you don't do so well, you get sacked, you learn, and you go again. So that's the craft he's got to go and learn. Anderlecht is a huge job, and I can't wish him anything other then all the luck in the world, because he's a really good lad. He's keen to learn. He's had some good mentors, by the way, in Conte and in Mourinho, even Nuno. He would have taken a little bit of something from everyone. So him, I can't wish him anything but good luck. The next one off the production list, by the way, will probably be Ben Davies. I think he'll probably go through that process. He'll take some coaching, an assistant manager, a manager, and off he'll go. But these are good football people. People like Ryan Mason, people like Ben Davies. Are you getting them on the back of your shirt? Maybe not. But these are proper football people. I can't wish him anything other than the best of luck. And if he comes back to Spurs a little bit older and a little bit wiser, I think Spurs could benefit from that.
Lovely words there. Yeah, listen, I agree. Listen, we do wish Ryan all the very, very best. Al, do you want to come back in on that point?
I can only echo that as well. And I'd also add to the ones to watch, Matthew Wells. I think he's going to be a terrific manager at some point. He's going to go on to do something. Stuart Lewis as well does the under-18s. Is a terrific kind of up-and-coming coach as well. So, yeah, there's a few coming through the system right now. And it would just, wouldn't it be brilliant if they do go away, have great success, and then come back having proved themselves? And because that's the thing at Spurs. Spurs don't really promote from within when it comes to managers. It's not just a thing. They go for the sparkly thing, whatever catches their eye, whatever they think is going to bring the kind of, well, mostly the instant success they think is going to come. And these guys have got to go away and prove themselves. I think some people thought, Scotty Parker was going to be one that was going to come back and maybe do that. And like I said, it's just so difficult, the road now for managers to just kind of keep on an upward trajectory. Because like Crackers said, like Neil Warnock said, you're going to get sacked so many times. It can be just any circumstances in football can turn against you. But it would be wonderful having, had to do a lot of asking questions of Ryan Mason over his 2 caretaker spells. And he's been, they threw him in the whole Super League fiasco, didn't they, for that first press conference? And, he handled it really well. He's only 29 years old then, youngest manager, I think, to have taken Premier League games at that point. He may still well be, but yeah, he's a good guy. He has got a really good style of football as well, good communicator, and yeah, I'd love him to be successful and come back to Spurs one day and take the job that he dreams of.
Lovely words. We shall see what comes of that and how it does go. We're going to turn our attention, unfortunately, guys, to the current form of where things are. I don't know why I should apologise. I mean, again, because I have to say at the moment with social media, and there's different feelings and different vibes about what people have made of the start to this season. And I've got to say that, rightly so, everybody's entitled to their opinion. It's quite funny that people won't listen to an audio. But as soon as I mentioned the current form, we've had Rick drop off. Crackers has gone to cover his camera. Jason, he's seen it all, Jason. That's why Jason's still here and he's smiling away because he's seen the worst. He has.
I'm still here, Rick. I'm still here. I've not abandoned ship yet. Not just yet.
Closely. But discussing the current form of where Spurs are at the moment, look, we've played 10 games this season, all competitions. We've won 6 of the 10 so far. We've drawn 1 and lost 3. I think it's fair to say that on the whole, I think bar the Coventry game and the Brighton game in the second half, I mean, Spurs' displays on the whole have been fairly strong. That obviously included a run of 5 victories on the spin. They've scored 13 goals in the process and conceded just 3. I think it's fair to say that when you look at the table in comparison to last season of where things are at, that we're not where we want to be. Spurs currently, where are we? We're 8 points already off the top of the Premier League. We are 4 points off the top 4 at present. And I just wonder, Al, what you make of the start to the season. And again, this is not to, try and look for an agenda here, but do you think by the fact that Ange come out, I think it was before the end of the, I think going into the season and said that for him, doesn't want to finish second, doesn't want to finish third or fourth. He wants to be challenging for the Premier League. Do you think maybe because of that expectation, that's where it comes from? Or can you understand the feeling around the fan base at the moment with regards to the start to the Premier League? And what have you made of it as a whole, covering it like you do?
Honestly, I can understand any Spurs fans' frustrations because we've had to go through the mill over the years, haven't we? So it's always a roller coaster. There's always something to either be joyful or absolutely despondent about. That's what Tottenham Hotspur do to us. You said it at the top of this, we were 18 minutes of stupid football from coming into this, talking about 6 wins in a row and how fantastic things were. because that's the ridiculous thing at Brighton. I was sat there in the press box at the Amex. We just watched the first half, which was brilliant. It was one of the most enjoyable first halves I've seen Spurs play. The patterns of play, some of the link-up stuff. Again, of course, as with many of the games this season, they should have had 2 or 3 more goals than they actually did. And there were various national journalists around me who hadn't seen Spurs for a little while, maybe a month, maybe 2, maybe some of them not even this season. And they were wowed by it. They were like, this is the Postecoglou football. This is what kind of he's been talking about. And it's like, yeah, this is kind of what they've been doing in a lot of these recent games. And early in the season, but just not finishing off the moves. And one national journalist who I won't name said behind me, they're that's it now. Yeah, I think they're going to hold on to it. They're going to sweep this game. They've really got it under control. Literally 30 seconds later, Brighton got their first goal, and it just all kind of went off a cliff from there. And that's the ridiculous thing. We're talking about 18 minutes of football that has managed to change the entire mood. And that is the ridiculous fine lines of football and how it works and the up and down nature of it. That, rather than this being not a euphoric podcast, but certainly a show where we're talking about a lot of the positive natures of it. And I still believe a progression from last season in terms of the structure within the team, the football they're playing. And it sounds ridiculous after the Brighton game, but before those 18 minutes, I felt the defending was so much more solid and better, and an understanding of how to defend within the Postecoglou setup. And yeah, just 18 minutes of ridiculous mistakes and really, really sloppy play, overconfidence, whatever you want to call it, probably all of the above. And it changes the entire mood. And in terms of the season as a whole, I know it's a cliche, but the results have not reflected the performances for me. I just don't think they have. I think there's been some really good performances in there. And I just think, had you probably had just even a little thing different, like Solanke sharp and ready from the start of the season, probably a lot of those chances in the early games are put into the net, and we're talking about them being, 6 points or so better off. But yeah, that's football. That's the way it goes, and it can suddenly turn on a knife edge. And I think he's got the set way of playing now in there, and I think in a young team going through a rebuild, you're going to have stupid moments of games like that. I think they're going to crop up. It's kind of what we said right at the start of the process, but of course we're all impatient, and I am exactly the same. We're starved of success at Spurs, and we kind of want it as quickly as possible, but you are going to have games where those sort of daft things happen. But overall, and I know not everyone's going to agree, but I can kind of see where this is going and the progression of it, but it's the results have got to come. That's the key thing.
It's interesting. I mean, I'll be honest, Rick, you are, as I've said to you before in the start of this, you're one of the most positive fans I know. And, it's interesting when I see such a divide at the moment across the Spurs fan base about how they're feeling about our manager. I remember under Pochettino in that second season that, I know Jason will pick me up on this, I think, to some degree, but I think I would say kind of now from kind of November onwards, I felt under Maurizio that definitely there was a feeling that we're going in the right direction as a general fan base. I know we had social media back then as well. I just thought at the moment that I'm not used to, like I say, this feeling of there's such a swaying judgment result at the moment over the manager. I mean, look, in terms of the Premier League, it's been 3 wins, 1 draw, 3 defeats. They've scored 14 goals. They've conceded 8. I mean, where are you, Rick, at the moment with regards to the current form? And I suppose the question I want to ask you is, are we exceeding your expectations based on the fixtures that you knew we were going to have at the start of the season at the moment?
It's crazy, right? Because even before the season started, there was a lot of fans online, and there was a lot of the fan base that were already kind of predicting that Postecoglou wouldn't last until November. So there was already this type of negative bias going into it. So when the results are rocky or when we're conceding goals, it's feeding into that beast. And right now, when we've spoken about social media, and like we've spoken about Brennan, and we've spoken about the human as well, but right now I feel that a lot of the time negativity sells. So negativity either gets you eyes or gets you attention, and sometimes whether it on different social platforms, sometimes it can even get you paid, right? So there's a kind of bias towards a negative vibe of things. So when you start to see these problems that you've already kind of preempted, it's feeding into that narrative, right? And for me, it's been the other way around. In all of the ups and downs throughout these games that we've had, I can really see that for the first time in a long time, that we've actually had a kind of philosophy, a pattern, a rhythm, you know, a direction. You can see that the boys are together in playing this way. It's a high risk, high reward, but with that high reward also comes the risk. And sometimes we're not going to get our reward. And sometimes it's our own fault when we don't get our reward, you know? And that's been the same way under many a different manager. I really have faith in what Ange is doing and the job he's doing, because he's had so much to overcome to get to this point already. I still feel it's in its infancy. This is, you know, there's, for the first time, I think it's only like Reggie that's there now that is probably a player that Ange doesn't want. The majority of players there are his players and all players that he wants there. So it takes time. It does take time to kind of iron out these traits that have been Tottenham over a period of time. And with the new rebuild and with the new team, there are going to be these bumps in the road. I think that those 18 minutes that we spoke about, I don't think I've ever seen, and maybe Ali can jump in, I don't know, but I don't think I've ever seen Ange as angry, like on the field after the game. You know, he's looking and you can kind of see, and I really don't want to break another manager. I really don't want Tottenham to break another manager, but I kind of saw it as a kind of a fired up moment. I saw that anger kind of going, oh, okay, cool. Well, okay, I know who I can trust. I know who I can't trust. Or I know who I need to kick up the backside. And I think he's going to go to war with it, you know. So I see where it's going. The negativity doesn't hit me as hard, and the high doesn't take me as high either. Of course, I'm always happy when we're winning. But I really got this belief in the center of me that says that this guy could be the one that is more successful than Pochettino and those before him. I really got this niggling feeling that, you know, that we are going to be successful under him. The glory times are going to come under him, but we're going to have to go through hard times. We're going to have to go through bumps in the road, and we're going to have to learn from our own mistakes to get there. And this is part of that journey.
I am going to come back to Al and ask about the media side of things, because Al has now had 14 months of Ange. So I'm intrigued to know from Ange, intrigued to know from Al what he's made of his, you'd say, in terms of the way he's been, or his composure over the last 14 months. Has that changed? Before I do, I mean, Cracks, look, I think it's fair to say that you are not shy of having your opinion on here. And I don't want to age you, because I'd never do that. You always look 21 to me. You've seen a lot of different managers over the course of your time supporting this great football club. And I think it's fair to say that we have had wobbles on here. I think that's part of the process. It's part of the journey. And, you know, for some, it's not going to be right for everybody. Where are you, Cracks, at the moment? You know, again, when I look and tell you that if Spurs had beaten Brighton, that would have been their 6th straight win in all competitions. It would have been the first time since 2018 they would have achieved that. You have to go back to Mourinho at the time to have had such a frequency of wins, which we knew before that would have then led to his sacking. But it tells you how long it's been since Spurs have been able to string 5 wins on the bounce. Yes, people will question the calibre and the teams we played in those 5 wins, but where are you at the moment, Cracks, in terms of the current form?
Do you know what, Rick, everyone? I just, like, I'll think about Ange and Spurs under Ange, and I'll spend 5 minutes convincing myself that this is the answer and everything's like going to be okay. And then I can equally spend 5 minutes thinking to myself, this just isn't going to happen. I genuinely cannot make my mind up under Ange and what he's doing, because I look at the football and then I look at the first half. Brighton's pretty much an absolute shining example of where I am in my thinking. You look at that first half and we get to half time and I'm thinking to myself, if this is Tottenham under Ange, I'm all in. I'm absolutely all in. I love this. This is what I want. This is what I want to see. This is what I grew up on in the early 80s. And I was watching those teams that suckered me into this Hotel California that's Tottenham. And then you look at the second half and you think to yourself, like, what's going on? Look, second half, let's get one thing straight. Ange sends his team out. Once they cross that white line, most of it is on them players to concentrate and do what they're supposed to do. And they didn't. It's as simple as that. So, you know, sometimes, God bless footballers, you do have to blame them. I know, like, they can be quite shrinking violets and quite susceptible to criticism these days, but they can be criticised. And that second half against Brighton, that was on them as players. What I want to see from the players, more than Ange, is when they get into the dressing room, literally having each other by the throat over that performance. I think, you know, you can move on in the world, and we live in much like softer, cuddly, feely times in football, but football's always going to be football. And if they didn't get into that dressing room at full time and a few punches thrown amongst them, I don't think you've got a football team, to be honest. Because whether it's 1971, 1974, or 2024, I think sometimes in football you just got to start like throwing a few fucks into each other, to be honest, and just and start telling people you're not doing your job. Get on with it. Go and make sure you're doing the right thing. And I don't think they did. And that's not on Ange. I don't know how I feel about him, Rick. I want to like him. I love his football. Listen, it's not Mourinho and it's not Conte. So there's a benchmark, and we're above that. So we're not getting fed the crap that they served up, for starters. But, you know, it's got to be a little bit more than that. I think with Ange and his football, and people talk about, can he be pragmatic? Can he find other ways? Can he close up shop, you know, when we're 2-0 up, 3-0 up, or whatever it is? If he doesn't find those ways, then just the natural laws of football, modern football, will just dictate his own future. No matter what we all gather around on podcasts and in written press and YouTube and this and that and social media, that's for the birds. If he doesn't get results, he'll go. It's as simple as that. So he'll seal his own fate, no matter what we all say. So look, you know, I just think he needs to find maybe some ways of just trying to change a little bit tactically. That goal that went in just after the halftime break against Brighton, you know, maybe he needs to just get out on the touchline, change things, see what's going on, make a change, a substitution, etc., etc. So look, if he learns to do that, which I don't think he has, by the way, because it just seems to be, he's like the gambler going into the casino. Every time he gets to 17, 18 on the blackjack table, he just goes twist, twist, twist. Now that's great to watch if you've got no skin in the game, because you're like, this bloke's insane, I'm going to watch him gamble. But sometimes, you know, you're not going to pull a 2 or a 3. You're going to pull a 7 or 8, and you're going to bust. So, and he's not for changing. So I think he's going to find his own level in this, and the way he does things. If it works, it'll work, and he'll be successful. And if not, he'll fall by the wayside. No matter what we all think, or what we all do, or what we all say on shows like this, football his football will just find its own level. It'll either work or it won't, and then, like, you know, it'll be the Welcome Gary Megson show, won't it? So that is his way, and God bless him for it, by the way, because he's going to stick to his principles, and it's either going to work or it's not, Rick.
You know what? On this point, I want to go to Ali. Then I'm going to bring Jason in. I want to get your thoughts, Ali, on this particular clip that was played as his interview back before Brighton. I want to get your just takeaways from this.
An open contest. So how do you keep it controlled?
Oh, we don't. Let's keep it open. That way we entertain everyone, and hopefully, get the result we want. We certainly want to, play an expansive game and be really positive. And like you said, Brighton try and do the same thing. So should be a good game.
I've got to get your thoughts on that, Al, because, I mean, as you know, that decidedly went viral after the game against Brighton. Very easy to say things and look back in hindsight if he said the right thing or the wrong thing. But what's your take on the manager coming out when he's asked about how to control a game to say, keep it open, we want to entertain everyone? I mean, is that, in your experience now dealing with Ange over these last 14 months, and not put words in your mouth, I think you said he's quite contrarian, is that just Ange with a flippant comment, or is he actually genuinely being serious?
No, it's contrary Ange. That's what he does. Honestly, we kind of now know in press conferences, if you kind of want him to go a certain way with his answer, you've got to give the opposite opinion to what you kind of want him to say. That's all. It of course, hindsight and playing it afterwards, it looks daft. It comes across as silly because they did play an open game and got caught on the flip side of the break. But yeah, it's just one of those where, because the rest of the quote was something about, because the actual question itself was about like taking control of the game rather than being open. Ange every week tells us about how he wants the team to control the game, how he wants them to not lose a grip on the game at all. So for him to kind of dismiss that and just say, no, let's just be open, let's go, end to end, brilliant stuff. It's just him doing what he thinks, I think, is a crowd pleasing quote. But actually, it's, if the game goes against you, it's just going to make you look daft very quickly. But I don't think he cares. That's the thing. I don't think he cares about stuff like that. I think it's all just like tiny little minutiae and what he sees as like an overall plan. But it just, it sounds daft. It's a bit like the comments after the game about substitutions and early subs, like not wanting false rewards. I think some of that was partly a message to his players, but it just comes across as a kind of a silly statement. Like, I wouldn't want to win the game anyway because it would have been wrong. And it's like, well, you weren't bothered at Coventry, were you, when they did that? It's like, I think managers just speak so much. Sometimes they just tie themselves up in knots.
I want to, before I bring Jason, just a final one to you, Ali, at the moment. Have you noticed of any differences from him in the 14 months that you've been very lucky to sit there in the pressers and to be able to give us, obviously, a lot of the feedback that we need? Because I think, again, this question is asked and it's said a lot. I mean, I think you do ask the questions that fans do want to hear. I think it's one thing you've always said on your own YouTube channel, that for you want to be able to ask the questions that the fans are really thinking and they're probing. So I'm really intrigued to know from you whether you've seen certain changes from Ange over these last 14 months, being so close to him you are, both pre-match and after the game.
Yeah, I mean, I must stress, I can't ask some of the questions that the fans ask because I can't like swear and rant at Ange like I think they'd want me to. Not really. I don't think. I think he's been quite consistent in the way he talks. He'll be as annoyed as anyone after a defeat. He was seething at the weekend. He was you could see it underneath his skin. It was like bristling at how annoyed he was at the game. No, if anything, I think probably because he knows a fair few of us now over the last 14 months, he's probably less snappy with us. And if he is snappy, it's in a kind of a jokey way. I don't think he kind of, is trying to be, unpleasant to us or anything like that. But he also knows that we've got to ask certain questions that he might not like. And I think he responds to those better than maybe he did at the beginning when he did answer back a little bit more quickly, whereas now you'll get quite a decent long answer out of him. No, I haven't really noticed too much. I mean, you could see it after the game that all of his interviews for broadcast and things like that were only like a minute, 2 minutes. I mean, his club interview was something like 72 seconds, 79 seconds long, whereas he came into the press conferences, gave us a good 8.5 minutes of stuff. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that he's kind of hiding away from anything, getting annoyed at anything. I think sometimes in the nature of a press conference, you'll have journalists that haven't been there for a while and might ask repetitive questions that we've asked in previous weeks. Those sort of stuff, you can see him getting a little bit like, ugh. And he'll use the term, as I've said before, and stuff like that. That's about it. I think he's been fine with us on the whole. I'm trying to think of any kind of occasion where he's got really snappy. No, even the Angie's Angels thing, he kind of played with it the other day as well. He hasn't really changed. He's been quite a constant in that.
It's interesting. I mean, Jace, I do want to bring you in, and before you come back at me, because I've got some graphics to share that, just for context when I say this, because again, it's important that I do say the word context here. Spurs have had their worst start to Premier League season after 7 games since the 08-09 season, where they only got 2 points after 7 games. However, really important to provide this context. Spurs ranked first in terms of pressing, running, touches in the opponent's box, and second most shots in the Premier League, which would indicate things are going in the right direction. Now, you have to bear with me, because I'm going to do a little bit of what Ali does sometimes, which is obviously story time of Alasdair Gold here. That I just want to share with you, Jay, some interesting graphics that friend of the show, Dan, very kindly provided us, Dan Morgan, that is. And this is the weird thing that, when you look at Spurs' beating Forest on the 15th of December, 2023, Spurs have played 14 away games in the Premier League and picked up 13 points. Now, the weird thing is Spurs' home form seems to stack up, actually, when you look at it against the other sides fairly well. They're averaging 2.14 points per game. They're joint fourth in the league. But if you compare that to the points picked up away from home, Spurs are well bottom of the top 8 clubs and below quite a few of the rest of the league too. Now, in terms of the graphs I'm showing here, trying to show, in general, it might not be surprised that points are gained away from home and there's dips in there, but points are gained slightly at home. But if you look at a discrepancy, and I want to just demonstrate this, is that 70% of Spurs' points won at home. And while their home record is good, as shown earlier, best fourth in the league, it's not enough to mask a poor away record. Now, I've said this quite often in last word on Spurs, that, for me, I generally look at a team and the barometer for me is to see how they are performing away from home. And you know what? I think it's hard to really gauge it when you are going through a transitional period. But, Jace, you've always been fairly, I'd say, fair balance when it comes to what the expectations are under Ange Postecoglou in this second season. In your mind, are you where Spurs expect to be when you're second season at the moment? Because I think that's maybe a question that I think the fan base may be asking themselves. They're looking at other clubs and they're comparing the process. But the point I want to make is that with Ange, he hasn't really lasted anywhere beyond 3 seasons. That's been his own choice where he's had an opportunity of progression to move on. So when we compare it to the likes of Arteta, who's been there for 4 or 5 seasons at a club, that may not necessarily be a fair comparison, because, again, you're looking at a manager that might not be here for that tenureship. So where are we in your mind, Jace, at the moment in terms of the form and the overall playing style?
Well, just on that graphic, the one thing that doesn't take into account is that Arteta and Eddie Howe and Eric Ten Hag and Pep Guardiola and that are all way beyond 45 Premier League games. So you're comparing Ange's 45 to their points ratio when they're into games, 90 and things like that. When we did that graphic earlier, you can see if Ange wins at Brighton, he goes above Klopp and Wenger, and he's above Mourinho at Tottenham, and he's above Pochettino at Tottenham, and he's above Ferguson, he's above Arteta. I think that's a more telling statistic of it. He definitely needs to pick up more away points, but I think the thing is with Ange, it's extreme football, isn't it? It's, there is no middle ground to it. And I think with extreme football, you get people that either fully buy in, or the other people think this is never going to work. It's very difficult to get that middle ground. And it's very difficult for him to change perceptions of it. So, Spurs are crap at defending corners, but we're now, 55 corners in and we've conceded from 1. Spurs' high line is going to kill them, but we're 11 games in and we've conceded 1 goal to a high line, which was the Newcastle one. There was a great picture from Hotspur Central on Twitter or X or whatever it is now that got sent to me, that does a still of all 3 Brighton goals. And the perception is Spurs are too open. I mean, if you look at that, you've got 5 green shirts for the first goal to defend against 2 Brighton players. So why is that too open? You look at the third goal, we've got about 4 people around that 1 Brighton player with the ball. And then you've got 4 other players in the penalty area. So you've got 8 defenders back there. You've got 1 on the edge of the box, but apparently Tottenham are too open. That's not open defending. That picture there is no way a goal should come from that. That's not an Ange, that goal. That's not tactically poor setup, that goal. It's not wide open. You don't need another couple of defensive midfield players to come on for that. But Laurel and Hardy on the 4 post, which we didn't see that, did we, Sunday, when I sent that clip through Sunday? Because we recorded straight after, before I'd really seen the goals back. But you look at if you can put that third picture up again, Rick, the third goal. I mean, you look where Danny Welbeck is between Romero and Porro. I think if you take a freeze frame a couple of seconds before that, Danny Welbeck's with Christian Romero. He walks away from Romero. Romero doesn't once turn his head and look where he's gone. And he's now positioned himself with Pedro Porro. And both Romero and Porro have only got eyes on the ball. Neither of them has a clue that he's there. You can't blame that on Ange. And that is exactly the Jamie Vardy goal at Leicester, where he walked straight between Romero and Porro and was totally, look, exactly the same goal. So, and again, when you look at that goal, there's enough white shirts back to deal with that goal. So, some of the things he's being accused of, I think is just that little bit lazy-ish that, it's too high line, we concede this, we concede that. When actually, if you break them down, there's far more individual mistakes. But of course, the problem on him is he's got to make sure that those individual mistakes aren't there. Why are Porro and Romero not aware? What are they not being told? Is there not enough focus on defensive training that makes them aware? Are they too lackadaisical in there? So they're the question marks. And the only thing I'd say at Brighton as well, those 18 minutes do totally change the perception, because a win there, we're what, 5th or 6th, and we're within a point of where we want to be. And people are saying we shouldn't have done this, we shouldn't have done that in the second half. At half time, if I went round the panel and said, what do you want from the second half? Each and every one of you would have said, I want more of the same. None of us would have said at half time, I tell you what, forget what we've done in the first half, bring Bissouma on and bring Pape Sarr on, take Maddison off and we shut up shop. None of us would have said that. Absolutely nobody would have said that at half time. But you concede within 2 minutes through an individual mistakes, and that totally changes the momentum. So I get that people then maybe say, make changes and that in there then. But nobody at half time would have told us to go pragmatic and change how we played in the first half. So that's where I sit with it. It's very easy to be wise after the event. Very easy. And managers don't have that luxury, do they? They have to go with it. At Manchester United, we scored within 2 minutes of the second half, took the game away. So that's his thinking. Go and do what you did at Man United last week. Go and score in the second minute, and then we're 3-0 up. Nobody's talking about the 18 minutes then. But, they're the tiny details or the tiny margins that you live on.
I think one of the things that has obviously come up a lot from that game is the fact that we didn't make a substitution until the 78th minute. Again, I feel for many, there might have been an argument there that there should have been a change earlier. I know that was put to obviously Ange in his presser afterwards, we'll come on to. But is what's killing Spurs more than anything the individual errors at the moment, Al? Is that what's really hurting Spurs more than anything at the moment? Because like I said, we've gone through the corner count and the amount we've considered from a corner. We've obviously only considered the one. We've got the high line situation. Back in the last season, we only considered the one. Is it just individual errors that are killing this team at the moment, or is it more than that?
I think that's one of the main things. It is, like Jace was saying, and this is what we were talking about earlier, that I do feel like a lot of the stuff that kind of Ange has been criticised for, they've really worked on hard this season. I think you can see a second season nature to a lot of the stuff, whether it is defending on the pitch, whether it's defending from the set pieces. But yeah, individual errors. I mean, I don't think it's any kind of, great kind of exclusive thing to say or anything, but Christian Romero hasn't been at the standard I think he will have wanted to be this season. I think he's been in and around a fair few of the goals that Spurs have conceded. He's had some really good games as well. I think Man-U, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, I think Everton, he was superb as well. But there have been games when his concentration has switched off at times, and he has lost players that he should be marking. And yes, I agree, and I felt this last season as well. There's times between Porro and Romero that they don't communicate properly, and they don't, which is ironic, of course, with the language. It should be the two players that should be communicating really well. But yeah, it's I think individually, and even Destiny Udogie, I still don't think we're seeing the sharpest version of Destiny Udogie yet. He only came back late in pre-season. And he had a tough game, especially that second half on Sunday as well. So it's the old cliche, isn't it? The kind of manager can put the players out there, but how many managers at Spurs have got seen off by individual errors from the players. You know, there's nothing you can do about it other than probably protect them after the game when it's individual errors. I think the only reason he kind of went at a few of the players on Sunday was because it was more of a collective thing, and the pressing dropped off up front and things like that, and the work rate and the duels were dropped off as well. But yeah, I mean, we can see that on the pitch, individual errors, and Bentancur was very quiet second half at Brighton. He kind of stepped off a lot of the things that he was doing really well in the first half as well. When you lose that little shield in front of the defence, that's another issue as well. But yeah, individual errors are always going to kill any team.
They are indeed. Rick's to bring you in. I think something that's happened against Brighton as well as for Spurs has happened a couple of occasions this season that it's hard to get away from, is that in away games, we seem to really find it hard to create in a second half. I'm thinking back at the likes of, even last season, Everton, Wolves, West Ham. We really struggled to seem to retain a threat on the counter when leading sometimes. Can you put your fingers to what that is, Ricks, or is it going back to what you're saying? This is a team still very much in transition, still learning, bedding in players. Is that a concern for you about sometimes the lack of creativity? Because my biggest concern about Spurs at the moment for me, and I said this about Ange, that where I am with Cracks is that I want to see lessons being learned from last season. And to be fair, I think from what we've said in the opening nearly an hour of this show is that we are seeing learnings from set pieces. We're seeing learnings from the high line. But there's this recurring theme with Spurs that I feel that when the going gets tough, we don't seem to have a player in there that can really roll their sleeves up and weather a storm for 20, 25 minutes and get us back into a game. Do you feel that way as well, Rick, or am I being...
No. I think it's happened, I think, twice. I think this is the second time it's happened. I think it was against Leicester where when the goal was conceded, it was almost like we got emotional. That going back to that insight that we had in the dressing room during pre-season, and you heard Ange speaking about, like, if we concede a goal, it's all about the next action. If we score a goal, it's all about the next action. Keep thinking about the next action, And I think sometimes they get wrapped up in their own emotion, and that's what ends up just deflating them. They end up getting frustrated. They end up, like, the tackles end up being a bit sloppy. Touches end up being off. They can't string two passes together. Suddenly the way that we were playing and everything that we was doing right is not coming off now. And you kind of see an emotional reaction rather than a let's get a hold of this. I mean, the one player that used to do that, who used to get it all the time, and I always used to appreciate what he brought to the side, was someone like Højbjerg, who used to come in and just break stuff up and calm things down. And sometimes he would roll around on the floor and he's suddenly his boots off and he's got to tie, get his boot back on his foot and tie. But all of that little 30 seconds has calmed the game down, and they can kind of regroup, reshape, and try and get back hold of it. We all know that Højbjerg is not an Ange type of player. So we have to find that in this group that we've got now. We've got to find a new spark. And, maybe that comes from someone like Solanke, who done really well, I felt, on Sunday. I think the more he gets fitter, the more he understands the runs of his teammates, and the teammates understand him. I think that could be a fruitful relationship, and especially with somebody like Richarlison coming back as well, where they can start dovetailing, and he doesn't have to kind of, be used in every game and stuff like that. So it ebbs and flows. But the one thing that I do remember, when Brighton went 3-2 up in the game, the commentators were like, you know what? Credit to Brighton's manager for sticking to his philosophy and for keep going and not changing anything to Labate. He kept going his way, and look at that, he's won 3-2. Within 10 to 15 seconds, they were like, Ange is it's terrible that Ange can't change his philosophy, that he can't tweak it, he can't, pull it back, he can't shut up shop, and that was the commentators within 20 to 30 seconds. Football is crazy, man. It's crazy, and that's why you got to kind of try and take the positives from it. Understand, what the way Jace just broke it down there was understand how the individual errors have hurt us. Understand when Solanke, wasn't in the team, that those chances wasn't getting gobbled up. We haven't got our captain Sonny right now, so there's a next element of it as well. So they do have to find that person in there. I thought it was Romero because he's an aggressive type, but he does need to speak a bit more maybe on the pitch. But they do need to figure it out, because twice now it's been an emotional response, and twice we've just collapsed within it. When we go to war, we're very hard to stop, and it's not about losing, but it's about, when you collapse and lose, that's horrid. If you lose through worldies or great play or the team deserved it, then great, cool, I can take that. But it's when you collapse like that it's really tough. So they do definitely have to find a solution for that. And I'm sure the steam coming out of Angie's heroes, I'm sure he's going to make sure he finds that.
Just quickly, Rick, as well, there's been all sorts of flack thrown at earlier in the season at Johnson, and then lately at Timo Werner. But Christian Romero lost Gabriel, he lost Vardy, he lost Welbeck, and he stepped up when he didn't need to step up at Newcastle. So, there's a lot more points that Christian Romero has cost us than Timo Werner has this season. That's all I'd say.
I mean, these are fair points. I mean, Cracks, is it back to the point that we've said a lot on this show that when you look at the squad, Andrew's got to work with that, still currently evolving? He hasn't got the squad there to be able to play the football that he wants to play? Or do you think that's always going to be a concern with the way Spurs want to play, where there is an emphasis on attacking football? Me and you've discussed this often about how sustainable this can be, when I've said to you before about the element of that, the managers that I've seen in my time watching football, there's an emphasis on having a solid foundation, you build from there, and all the great teams I've seen that have won titles have always had a solid defence, whereas we've discussed the individual errors that obviously are really hurting us at the moment. Is the squad there for Ange at the moment, in your opinion, Cracks, to be able to play the way he wants to play?
I dare say, Rick, that there's a few players that he still wants to bring in, and the types of players. I think Romero looks like he's checked out already from Tottenham, to be honest. There's talk of Real Madrid coming in for him. I'm a bit more fearful that we probably lose Mickey van der Ven than Christian Romero at the moment. And, if somebody's maybe speaking to another club off the radar, if you like, which, surprise, surprise, Real Madrid do have a little bit of form for, and they're talking to Christian Romero, then there's every chance that his head's already checked out. So I think, I think Ange there's probably 2 or 3 positions where he'd like to bring in somebody else or his own player. I don't just think it's even playing staff. I think there's probably some backroom staff as well that he probably wants to look to change with conditioning, etc., etc. I mean, there's a whole raft of staff that work behind the scenes at football clubs now: dietitians, psychologists, fitness and conditioning, lifestyles, this, that, everything else. There's lots. So there's probably quite a lot of staff members, not just those that cross the white line and play, that he does want to bring in. Does he get the time to do it? Let's see. That's down to the club more than anything. Of are they brave enough to weather some storms as he sort of works his way through to bring those members of staff in, with some poor results here and now, and get the right sort of people around him, which is what we saw happen down the road, and now it's paying dividends for him. So it's hard to know, but you've just got to hope that the club, as and when Ange says to him, look, this isn't working for me, I need X, Y, and Z instead of A, B, and C, are they going to back that up? And I think it's a little bit the great Sonny question, isn't it? I've said to you before, Rick, and I've said on the show, if Ange turned round to the club and said, listen, I think Sonny's now got to an age where his performance and this and that and his stats are dropping off, we need to do something in that position. Would the club turn around and say to him, okay, no problem, your choice, away we go. We'll have to look to move Sonny on, whether that be it a club ambassador or something, because obviously he's a huge financial benefit to the club. None of us are stupid. We know that football runs on finances, and he brings quite a lot in. Or would they say, oh, no, I think there's probably maybe another season where we need him playing, because there's a lot of bums on seats spending a lot of money at the club. So that's the balance that we've now got to find at the club. The club need to literally nail their colours to the mast with Ange and back him, and every decision that he makes, or find another way. I don't know whether the club and the board of directors at the club have actually got the minerals to see that through and just go, okay, right, if that's your call, and we'll go with it. And if it works, fantastic. If it doesn't, okay, we'll review it at the end of the season. So I don't think, Rick, that Romero actually suits Ange's style of football. I don't think he's an Ange type of defender. I think he's a fantastic defender. I think he's terrific, but I don't think he suits Ange's type of football. Mickey van der Ven is an Ange defender. Romero isn't. So, for everything that's going on, maybe in the background with Real Madrid coming in for him, etc., it might not be the worst thing in the world if he does go and you bring in an Ange defender, if that's what Ange wants. But so, either, nail your bollocks to the mast, or it is, isn't it? Shit or get off the pot. Go with something. At least go with something. You've got to go with something. If you give somebody half a chance and then they go, and then the next manager comes and he gets half a go, and then the next he goes, and then we've been doing that for so long, haven't we? We've just been sort of a little bit pregnant with a lot of managers. just go balls in with somebody, back it, and if it works, brilliant. If it doesn't, at least the right-minded people amongst the fan base can turn around and go, all right, it didn't work, but by Christ, we gave it every chance for it to work. So that's all I want to see. I just want to see somebody brought in, given a chance, and go with it. And if what players they want, give them players. And what players they want out, get rid of them players. Just nail your colours to the mast on something. That's all you ask.
I hope Al's taking his notes for the next pre-season tour when he gets to sit down with one of the board officials, please God, at some point. I want to ask you, Al, on the points Cracker's making there and about the DNA of the club. The collapse at the Amex, and Jason came back at me on this point. It was the 10th time Spurs have lost a Premier League away game in which they've led by 2 or more goals, at least 3 more than any other club in Premier League history. Is that a running week of mentality through the club that has been a problem to solve regardless of the manager? Because we've had different managers, different players, different coaching staff, and we've changed everything, apart from, as people know, the one constant in the club being the boardroom. So is that just an unlucky stat? Do you read anything into that? Or is there a deep-rooted mentality problem at Tottenham in your view?
Oh, what a question. Yeah, two sides. I want to talk about some of the stuff that Cracker's just said as well. Maybe with slightly different language.
Are you sure?
yeah, no, in a slightly different way. And first off, yeah, the thought of actually getting a board member in pre-season is very funny. There's not a chance, honestly. The day that happens will be amazing. Yeah, it's difficult to get away from that stat. 10 times it is ridiculous. And I do think, of course, there's a little bit of a psychological thing there with Spurs. You know, there clearly have been more collapses in games. There's a touch of kind of misfortune about it as well. But yeah, I think there's definitely a mentality aspect there. And just on some of the stuff that Crackers were saying, you know, it's spot on in a lot of it. There's one I disagree with, and that was Romero not being an Ange player. I actually think he is. I think the passes he plays between the lines and the aggressive kind of way of pushing up is exactly what Ange wants. And I would say that you're probably not in an Ange system going to have both centre-backs as speedy centre-backs. There's probably is going to be one that brings something different and one is the speedy one that covers behind them. Other than that, the rest about the whole nailing things to the mast, absolutely agree with that. You know, the club's bloody whole motto is to dare is to do, and I always have felt that about the owners, Daniel Levy, the club, whatever you want to say, whoever it is. You know, the way they deal with managers is not to dare is to do. Never has been. It's always been a panicking, screaming mess of, oh no, what do we do now? Let's flip to the next person that, you know, maybe is making headlines somewhere and might save us and make us look better. I absolutely agree. They do not dare to do whatsoever. And I have got a manager now that has changed so much about the club behind the scenes as well. So much is different across the departments in what he's been getting done there. And you've just got to give him time to see this. I mean, how many overhauls, how many revamps have we had at this club and rebuilds that have never really been seen through? And that's why you have Ange ended up with a squad that was like a Frankenstein's monster of a squad for different managers that he's had to kind of put together. And I would actually say the squad he's got now is probably as close as he'll want it to get there. Yeah, he could have done with a couple more experienced players, but he tells us that wasn't what he was looking for. But what I would say is if you had Son, Odegaard, Richarlison available as options right now, suddenly I think everything's a lot different because at the 60-minute mark, he's able to do what he often does with subs, which is refresh key areas of the pitch where you need pressing and movement and all of that. And I think across these games, we'd have seen probably the results to match the performances because the players wouldn't have been so tired going on. Whereas I do feel like he's got these very young, exciting players that are coming through or have been brought in, but they're maybe not ready yet to kind of, or not ready yet, it's probably the wrong way to put it, but he's still trying to indoctrinate them into his ways and what he wants from them. It's going to take that slightly a little bit longer with them across this season, but they're going to be stars. But yeah, I mean, going back to the original question, you can't get away from 10 collapses from 2 goals or more. You know, we know the word that is associated with that when it comes to Tottenham, which I'm going to use for the 1000th time. But yeah, it's something they've got to rid themselves of. And probably the peak Poch years was when they were starting to get away from that. We weren't seeing many collapses and things like that, and there was far more consistency. And I think if Ange is able to build what he wants to build, I think they're going to get back to that. But yeah, they've got to give him time to do it and not just keep throwing everything out the door every time they want to panic.
Can I repeat it, Rick?
Go on, him. I know you're going to say. Go on.
10 times. 1,185 games, and it's happened 10 times. Once every 3 seasons, it happens. You know?
I hear that.
But how many times we scored 5 in those 3 seasons in a game? I mean, if you change it because it happens, oh, this is so Spursy, it's happened again. We stop trying to score 5 then, because that's happened a lot more times than 10 times in 1,185 games. Get real. Jesus Christ, it wouldn't have happened to Luton because Luton haven't played 1,185 Premier League games, would they? Jesus Christ almighty, there's only 6 teams it could have happened to. And in greatest respect, Man United, Liverpool, Chelsea and Arsenal through the majority of the Premier League have been better than us. So it's those types of records of who's lost most games. Effectively, it's always going to be Tottenham or Everton because we're the teams that have been in the Premier League more. Put some fucking perspective on it, please.
Also, we've got to give him a 10-year contract, I think, because I can't have another manager come in who's won everywhere else and come to Tottenham and not lift something at Tottenham. So he's got to stay and work it out until we lift something, because I can't do it. I can't do it, Ricks. I can't do it.
Crack's coming there for us. I already come back on that point.
Yeah, but the next nearest team is on 2-0 collapses, which is, who's that? I think there's 2 on 7, isn't there?
There is 2 on 7. Yeah, there is 2 on 7. There is. But
so probably one of them's Everton, and they haven't been 2-0 up as often as Tottenham in that time. Because under Sean Dyche or their other managers of the last 10 years, they've always been 2-0 down, not 2-0 up.
I get your point, Jace, but there's statistics and statistics, isn't there? But that is like nearly that's sort of 30% more times that we've done it. But the worrying thing is that those 10 collapses have come under different managers, completely different squads. It's one of those. So I don't think this is a manager thing or a squad thing. This seems to be a club thing. This is almost like a cultural thing at the club, that we can go 2-0 up. I get that. I get that that's probably shot through the prism of the media, because nothing sells clicks and views and this and that like a Tottenham collapse. It always has done. It always will do, because you only have to look at Talk Sport. They're like, as much as I love Talk Sport and a lot of friends there, they're never talking about Luton. They're never talking about Everton. They're never talking about anyone other than us. Us and Man U are absolute box office when there's a collapse, isn't there? Absolutely box office. So, even if it was 6 collapses, it would, and less than maybe others, they'd still look like it was more collapses, because we just get shot through that prism of like, oh, Tottenham have collapsed again. Like, we can get 3 days of like sort of shows out of this. But that's the fact, is that when these collapses happen, it just seems to be us in the barrel, doesn't it? It's but I don't know. Maybe there's a cultural thing at the club that causes this. I don't know, Rick. I don't know. Get a psychologist on, and that's not me, by the way.
That's Mac is trying that. Mac is trying that for us. He is. Before we do go for our final break of the show, such as the talk around Madrid, that I think Al will always say this as well. You get interesting snippets that come up during the international break. One that I do need just to bring to everybody's attention is an interview that Pedro Porro has given away on international duty. Now, again, have to say this because for the caveat that it may have at any point have been a misinterpretation, but the talk coming out of, I believe it's Spain, where he's given his interview, is that Pedro Porro links to Real Madrid. Of course, I'm proud with these links. It means I'm doing things well. If that happens one day, it happens. Now I'm fully focused on my club, Tottenham. So here we are talking about Romero potentially and what happens there in the future. But Pedro Porro is giving a mention there about Real Madrid. So we'll see what happens with that. And it's not a story we'll dive into now, because we are, as always, pushed for a little bit of time. We are going to go for our final break of the show for our listeners on audio. Thank you so much for your support. Nearly 3,000 of you are watching this show live. Like I say, can't thank you enough for the support. Given it's an international break, given that we aren't able to bring you the most upbeat show we'd love to with Al here with us. But I think it's fair to say, we said this before actually, when Al's been on here, there's been also all kind of things going on around the football club where things at the moment as we recalled, and I have to say that at the moment as we recall, things are relatively calm. But like I say, Spurs could be losing a coaching staff member, and then a player come out reportedly and given some nice words there to Real Madrid in the future. But I want to turn our attention to close this show on what are the expectations for this season. Now, Spurs have started Europe in a decent fashion so far. They've got 2 wins out of 2 in their Europa League group. So Spurs are nicely placed at the moment there. They've got an upcoming game in the Carabao Cup, as we know, against Man City at home. That's a huge game in the context of our season. Ricky Norm knows more than anyone on this show how much I need a trophy. We want a trophy. God, how much we need it. Want to ask you, Al, because quite interestingly, this is not a negative I'm going with here, but when you look at what managers are judged on and how the season does play out, a lot for the, I don't want to categorize fans, but the older maybe fan look at the cup competitions as being something that is a real high priority. So when you look at the starts of the Europa League, the fact they've drawn Man City in the Carabao Cup, how important is it, Al, in terms of these cup competitions to stay in them for as long as we possibly can and get a cup run? Because I think that's one thing that, as we know, last season going out to Fulham in the early stages wasn't easy. We went out very early in the FA Cup as well to Man City, didn't have European football. How much do you feel the cup competitions will play a huge part as to whether this will be a successful season under Ange?
Yeah, I mean, he's desperate to be the man that brings trophies to Spurs. You know, that's his whole kind of mantra right now. He had a nice little bit in a press conference it was either last week or the week before, when he was saying that that's what he tells the players is don't be weighed down by this history, this lack of, or recent history of lack of trophies. Be excited by that. Be the person that breaks that. Be the person that brings that silverware to the club, because you're going to become legends essentially. And yeah, I think it's of course that he's aiming across all competitions this season. He's that kind of guy. I mean, I know people will play it down because it's Scottish football and things like that, but of course he won across the board with Celtic. The treble before leaving as well, and he'll want to do as much as he can at Spurs as well. And it's the Europa League is there to it's a different competition this season. You're not going to have the Champions League teams dropping into it. It's all set up for them if they want to go for it. They have started well. They've put themselves in a good position to hopefully keep going and avoid that little silly kind of knockout round that comes it's like a playoff thing for those teams from 9th onwards. Carabao, throws up Man City again, as they had in the FA Cup last year. But it'd be interesting to see whether Man City rotate. They do in that competition as well, and whether Spurs go strong. But they've just got to go for it. It's I'm exactly the same. It's what we need. Not only as a fan, but I want to report on that. How brilliant to be able to report on that. The last trophy was before I was covering the club. I'd love to have that feeling of writing about the players going up the steps to lift a trophy. It'd be incredible. It's not the be all and end all for Ange in terms of, the only reason I say that before anyone jumps on that is, you look at Juan de Ramos, last guy to win a trophy, he was gone within 4 months after. So it's not the be all and end all for a manager, but if it's part of what he's doing and part of the progression, then it's going to seal him as essentially as one of the biggest managers in recent years. When you've had the likes of Mourinho and Conte, and they couldn't do it with their experience of these things. And I did feel like last season, one was a penalty shootout. They go out into the Carabao Cup, and then you've got Man City in the FA Cup. So it wasn't the easiest kind of end to both of those competitions, but I've just got a feeling that something's coming this season. I do. On
that point, just before we bring the guys back in, Carabao Cup game against Man City, can you see a similar lineup to Coventry, or do you think he will go stronger? I have to ask that question. You just don't know. You just don't know, because you look at the previous selections against Fulham, with all due respect, and obviously Coventry. I think feeling with the fans that he was going to go a bit stronger, but I have to ask that question. What do you think?
No, I think he'll go strong. I think he knows he has to. I think it's different circumstances, isn't it? I think in those games he kind of felt that he should be comfortable in the players he was picking to do the job. Obviously at Coventry they almost blew it. They weren't quite ready. There were a lot of players that weren't sharp, that weren't fit. I think for that game he goes relatively strongly. I don't think he'll put like a full strength team. I think he'll change a couple of the faces, so maybe like 2 or 3 changes, but it will be a pretty strong lineup that's put out there.
And also finally, because I know you spoke about this as well, I think some of us are trying to get our head around the fact that Jed Spence is not part of the Europa League squad, and the fact we did obviously take 4 goalkeepers there and Fraser Forster as part of that. I mean, when you look at that decision now, 4 or 5 weeks on, is it even more baffling? Because to be fair to Jed's looked fairly impressive when he has come on for Spurs, done really well away at Manchester United. To some degree, and people might think I'm really sensationalising this, I really think that, I wouldn't say saved the season against Coventry, but the way and the feeling that fans were in that stadium, if Spurs don't get that goal, I don't think we talk about 5 wins on the bounce afterwards, and here we are after an international break. So I just wonder, is Jed being criminally underused to some degree? And why do you think, he wasn't selected? If there's an understanding as to why, can you get that at all?
Well, you know, I was gutted. I was not in the press conference that came after the squad, and I think even he noted that I wasn't
he
there.
did refer to you as being your baby after all this. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, because the logic was, I think, clearly that he didn't trust the goalkeepers that he had beyond Fraser Forster, which, you know, look at it in whatever way you want. Brandon Austin getting a new 5-year deal and not really being considered to be in second choice and things like that. I kind of would have understood it if he then played Fraser Forster in the next couple of European games. And he didn't. He didn't play him at all. I think he will play later in this competition once they've got their kind of progress secured. I think that's the way it'll happen. But it's just been such a kind of a loss for Jed Spence season, because he's really knuckled down. He's done so well this season. In the summer, he was terrific. Coaches loved him. Ange loved what he was doing. And he's made a difference pretty much every time he's come on for Spurs. And, you know, I was surprised he didn't come on against Brighton, because I think he could have changed the momentum of that game in the way he plays. But yeah, it still baffles me. I just think it comes down to the goalkeeping situation, that he doesn't trust those backup goalkeepers because of their lack of experience. But you end up with a squad that has 4 senior goalkeepers. You've got young Luca Gunter, who was named in the B list a couple of weeks ago. And actually, I think in the last 2 European games, he's been called onto the B list. So you've got 5 goalkeepers, and you're scratching around each week trying to fill the defence with fresher players for these other games, because Jed's not in there. So, yeah, it is very harsh on Jed. I'm sure there'll be a reason and he'll stick to it. Until it really kind of comes back to haunt him, it's one that probably sits in the back burner in terms of questions that we're going to ask him at some point.
For sure. Rick, a nice easy one for you to get you off your seat. Is winning a trophy key to the overall happiness of fans or not?
I mean, it's been something that we've had to carry for a long time, and then each year we don't lift a trophy. I think the weight of that bag just keeps getting, you know, heavier and heavier. But I actually like what Postecoglou says when he it's not just lifting a trophy; it's continued success. It's that kind of consistency with a style of play, with a winning way. I think that's really exciting. I think for us, all of us fans that have waited forever, it feels like, to lift another trophy. I think it's definitely important. The sooner that happens, the better. But you know what? I remember being at, I want to say it was a 99 cup final at Wembley.
Leicester, yep.
Yeah, it was. And after we'd won, I was on the train back with my dad from Wembley, going to Liverpool Street, and the train was silent. Do you know what I mean? Like, they were singing on the way down, but then we got on the train and the train was silent. And my dad was like roaring. Do you know what I mean? He's like, come on, Tottenham. It's not like we win every week. And he was getting everyone going. And some piped up. Do you know what I mean? But one of the guys was like, yeah, well, we've won that. Well, what's next? And it was like that. Do you know what I mean? It was like that. So, yes, for us fans, it's desperately needed. And I think it would be a great convincer of his belief system amongst the squad as well. Because I think that they need to, you know, as much as they say that they're believing, if they can actually win something that seals the deal, that says, you know, this way is the way, we can win this way. If you believe and you truly kind of give your 100% to the way. And I don't have to tell you as well. It's like you're thinking and you're breathing and you're walking in the way. So I don't have to direct you. You're already in it. And once you get to that point and you seal the deal with a trophy, you know, that could be the springboard for, you know, a period of success. So it is important for the players as well. But it's about that continued success. It's about that consistency. It's about challenging. It's about being up there on a consistent basis. And I think that's what's really exciting for me when it comes down to Ange and the way he wants to go.
Cracks, you have the obviously pleasure of interviewing so many ex-legends of our football club that have told you what it is like to win a trophy, lift the trophy, be part of squads that have won trophies. I suppose you can't quite believe maybe it's been this long without a trophy. I think any of us can believe, you know, for me growing up as a kid, I was told Spurs are a cup team, ironically. And here we are waiting so long for a trophy. Do you feel in any way, if Ange does get a trophy, he's almost job completed? I don't mean that in a disrespectful way or disparaging way, but for a club that hasn't won a trophy for so long, and the fact that he's made such an emphasis of it in his second season, he always wins a trophy, which I will ask Al about that in a second as well, before we look to wrap up and close. What do you feel, Cracks, for you? You look at this season being a success in your eyes. What needs to happen?
Trophy wins, Rick, yeah, and Tottenham's lack of it. What a load of old social media bollocks. Honestly, it absolutely is. It's just bollocks. It's nonsense, right? Newcastle, yeah. Oh, the big old Newcastle now, 1955. 1955. Aston Villa, 1996. Honestly, you go through Arsenal, the mob down the road. It's coming up 5 years since they last won a trophy. So, like this social media thing of like, oh, Tottenham's trophy cabinet. There's a lot of clubs in the same boat as us, or in fact, a lot worse. But for some reason, because Paddy Power and a couple of other like outlets have put together a bit of a social media thing, it's become a thing. It has become a thing. And because everyone's bought into this social media bollocks, I'll say it again, like it's almost become like the truth. But it's not. It's just this shitty stick to hit us with. And so, and it weighs round the club and the fans' neck like a millstone now. But equally, we do need to go out and win a trophy because they do help. I don't care if it's the League Cup or anything else. A trophy is a trophy. And when you're a kid playing football, you get into football to go and win stuff. Now, you can come fourth in the Premier League and you can qualify for the Champions League. But I'm telling you now, Haringey Council is not shutting the streets of Tottenham and having an open top bus parade for that cheque being paraded off the open top bus for the 40-50 million quid that the club's going to get from it. You win the League Cup and them streets will be flooded with fans wanting to see the team parade a cup. So I get there's a disparity now. The club itself, let's have it right. The truth is, if you offered the club and the bean counters at the club fourth or the League Cup or the FA Cup, or even if you offered them the League Cup, the FA Cup and the Europa League Cup or fourth, all day long, they'd push their little glasses back up on their face, have a look at their spreadsheet and say, I will take fourth, thank you very much. But I'm not a bean counter at the club. I'm a fan. I've been a fan since 1975. I'll take a cup, thank you very much. And every player that I do the interviews with will tell you, when you go and win a cup, when you go up them steps to lift it up and you're done and dusted, the next day you are thinking about the next one. You want that feeling again. That is heroin to football fans and players. That is absolute drugs to them. You win a cup, you want to win another one, and you want to win again and again and again and again. It drives people on. You speak to any of them players that won cups in 81, 82, 84, they said that's what drove them on. They wanted that next one. They wanted to go again. So it's important. It is really important. You can forget the money that this pays and that pays and the Super League and this and that, because we all know that modern football now is all about who's got the best barristers and it's all courtroom dramas, isn't it? There's nothing like going to Wembley and winning a cup. And if Ange can do that, then that's legendary. That's absolutely legendary. I want to walk up Wembley Way with my lads, go to the game and see us lift a cup. If that's a League Cup or an FA Cup, or go to Seville, go over to Spain, and see us win the Europa League, that's everything to me. Everything, Rick. That's what we all get into this crazy game for. Cups. Want to see it.
Oh, man. Jason, final one to you before we go back to Ali to close. I think, Jason, you've said it so often in this show, and I think it does get undermined sometimes about how hard it is to win a domestic cup. I know you've very kindly provided the stats to us last time about what you have to do to get there. You know, you always are going to have to beat the likes of a City, a Liverpool, an Arsenal, a Chelsea en route. Is that something, again, more than any other country, how hard it is to win in England a domestic cup, especially? We're just going to bring Jason off mute if we can.
Well, there you go for the Carabao Cup. We're going to have to get past Manchester City to start with, aren't we? So you look at it, the last 30, I think it's the last 30 domestic trophies, 87% have been won by 4 clubs, which tells you how hard it is. You know, it's simple as that. It's you're going to have to get past, and Arsenal have won 5, but you know, Man United, Man City, Chelsea, and Liverpool have cleared up 87% of the last 30 domestic trophies. It's that simple. So you know, you're going to have to get past probably 2 of those to win it. And Crackers is right. You know, how many times have Newcastle won it? How many times have Villa won it? How many times have Everton won there? How many times have West Ham won them? You know, but we'll take all the flack. And yet we've got 17 trophies, not 0. But, you know, I think we will get past City. My one worry with City, when you talked about the team, we've got Palace away at the weekend before it. Then we play Man City on the Wednesday, and we play Aston Villa the following weekend at home. So, you know, Palace away, Villa at home are not the 2 easiest fixtures to have that Manchester City game between. And I think he will make changes for the Manchester City game. I don't think it'll be a Coventry lineup or a 4 teenager lineup, but I think he will rest 1 or 2 players for that City game, and then it's whether City do it as well. I mean, I remember them going to Newcastle last year. That might have been the same round. And De Bruyne played, and Haaland played, and all of that lot. So, you know, it remains to be seen what City do. But, you know, with the 2 extra European games and with their Club World Cup commitment, maybe they will throw a full-on squad rotation. I don't know. But it's, you know, you're going to have to beat the big boys. But I think we can get past City. You know, when that draw came, you saw Liverpool's team, I think, against West Ham in the last round. They didn't rest anyone, did they? I think Salah played, and
Yeah.
pretty much they all played apart from maybe the goalkeeper. I think even Van Dijk played in that game. So, you know, you're going to have to beat some big boys along the way. And that's our problem. Can we beat those big teams away from White Hart Lane? Be it Wembley, be it on their grounds. Until you can start believing you can do that and seeing you can do it, it's going to be hard to win a trophy.
I mean, Al, just to summarise and close here, and you look at what's coming up for Spurs, big London derby against West Ham, one of the teams that he failed to beat last season, with all due respect. And, you know, I think he does need a big London derby win, because you look at the fact that Chelsea, we didn't do it last season. And we go back to, like I say, these cup competitions, which, again, we know they're not going to be easy. So a nice, easy one to finish for you, because you know I've given you easy questions. What do you feel is success for Spurs this season, and what keeps Ange motivated to stay in the job, as much as, you know, whatever we think as fans? Because I mentioned that point earlier in the show, that doesn't tend to stay anywhere more than 3 seasons. And that's based on the fact that he normally seeks progression, or he normally gets a move. And I think he's been open and said that, you know, he'd love to be the manager of, I believe, Greece in the future. He sees that as an opportunity for him. So what do you think, Al? What is success for Spurs this season?
Yeah, on Greece, he kind of keeps going on about his sun lounger more than probably managing them in the long term. But success, I think it's got a trophy is the aim, of course it is. But like Jason said, how difficult it is actually to do that. I think progress is the main thing, to see an improvement from last season, to see that the second season has pushed on. For Ange himself, he'll want silverware. That's just what he has done, as he's constantly, not constantly told us, but as he has told us whenever asked, that is what he's done in his past. So yeah, I think success, for him will be silverware. And I think for the club, of course, like Cracker said about the bean counters, I love that. It's like, I do think that, though, that they would want a trophy to get that pressure off their backs. I really think they would, surely, because that is the stick that is constantly used to beat them with. You would imagine that surely the owners would want that. I know there was the fans forum recently where he was asked about the 3 greatest achievements, Daniel Levy, and he left out winning a trophy out of one of the 3, which went down as understandably as it probably would do. But I think success this season has to be progress and hopefully some silverware. And just very quickly on the West Ham game, I think that's the perfect game to come back to. Yeah, again, this could be one of those daft comments like Andrew's pre-match one, but for me, I would have loved, after what happened at Brighton, to have a game straight away, like they did with Coventry, to go straight into another game and put that out of their system and kind of have a reaction. Whereas with the international break, that kind of is all dull and you don't get that. But with it being West Ham, with it being in front of the crowd and everyone kind of behind them knowing, you got to do this for this crowd because they're going to absolutely, destroy you if you don't put in a performance that's worthy of this game. I think it is a really good game to come back to.
Great point on that, because again, we're looking at what's coming up. I think Spurs have got 4 of the next 5 at home, so it's an opportunity to really have a good month going into another international break in November, where it does feel like, I say, when you get to that point, things are starting to really get to the business point of the season, where you're looking, obviously, again, Carabao Cup's in there as well. Going to go very quickly around. We're going to close on Ali here. Jace, I'm going to ask you this again, based on what you've seen so far, season-wise. Give me a prediction of where we're going to finish from what you've seen so far.
5th or 6th.
Okay. We'll go to Cracks. Any cups in there?
I don't know. I can't sit here and say definitely, for sure, until we start beating those teams away from home.
The Man City, if Spurs beat Man City, that gives you the confidence?
If Spurs beat Man City at home, it gives you belief you can beat the big boys, but we've still got to do it away, because the final's not played at White Hart Lane. One of the semi-final legs of the Carabao is away from home. The semi-final of the FA Cup is away from home. The Europa League games will be 2 legs, away legs. So you've got to do it away from home against some big boys.
We shall see. Cracks, what do you think based on this season, what you've seen so far? Where's Spurs going to finish?
I can't believe Ange keeps talking about retiring to a sun lounger in the sun somewhere exotic. Who wants to do that, Rick?
Yeah.
So you agree? They agree on something.
Can we be a little bit more Baywatch than Crime Watch this season? Because that's what it is, isn't it? It's like, can we be more first half of Brighton than second half of Brighton? I don't know. If we can be more first half of Brighton than second half of Brighton, then we can probably come away from this season with our heads held high. I don't know, Rick. I can't. It's in the balance, isn't it? So let's see. If we can knock out some silly mistakes, and just be a little bit more pragmatic, then we might have something. But you never know. It's Tottenham, isn't it? For Christ's sake, it's like this is what you get. You just don't know what you're going to get. Anybody that loves a bet never puts Tottenham in their ACCA, do they? Don't ever put Tottenham in your accumulator, because you just do not know what you're going to get. But let's see, Rick. Let's see. If nothing else, it gives like a bunch of middle-aged blokes that should know better an excuse to gather around some laptops and talk nonsense for an hour and a half, doesn't it? Bless them.
One thing, Rick, can I just say, because Crackers and I had the conversation in the week, I think the failure to name the trophy, I can kind of understand. I think if he'd have turned around and said, one of my greatest successes was winning 1 League Cup, he got ripped to pieces for that. And I think that the alternative view, and you don't have to accept the alternative view at all, but the League Cup that he won was our 17th trophy. So his achievement is doing what the club has done 16 times before, whereas you could look at the Champions League and say the club reached a level that night that it has never been on in its 140-year history. So that's the thing. It's an achievement what the club's already done 16 times before, or what the club has never done in 140 years. My problem on the night was by just him saying, and we've had some great players. because every club's had great players. And you know what? We haven't got any great players left apart from Sonny. So, you know, he's had to sell all our great players like Bale and Harry Kane and that. So that was the one that I had the problem with being in there, not for losing a game that put us on the elitist level and the highest club game you can ever reach in club football in Europe.
Really fair points. Rick, finally to you. What do you feel this season's going to bring us from what you've seen in the opening game so far?
For me, bro, I think that I'm going to go for like a fourth or a fifth finish. And I think any cup competition without Man City in it, I think we should go for wholeheartedly. And you know, that Europa League can also bring us Champions League football as well as a trophy if we win it, of course. So I really want that trophy. I really want that European trophy. I think I think it'd be fantastic for us. I think it'll just do wonders, bro. I mean, if we can do more, if we could get the Carabao Cup to kick it off for Ricky Sachs, and then we can go and get the Europa League at the end of the season, I would love that. But I see us finding it, bro. I have to see us finding it, because if I don't, then I'll be sitting in a dark room banging my head against the wall. Do you know what I mean? And nobody wants that, you know. So I've got to believe that it's going to click. You know, things, they're going to ship and shape themselves up, and they're going to find a way. And you know, we'll be singing in the next podcast.
I hope so. I want to say a massive thank you to Jace, to Cracks, to Ricky, to close with Al. Al, thank you so much for your time. These don't get any shorter, I'm afraid. But listen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on here. For those that don't know where to find you, it's a silly thing to say. I don't know. How can they not find you, bless you? Of course, Golden. Listen, where can they find you, Al? Tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, all of the usual. Golden Guest Talk Tottenham podcast, Football London, writing away, YouTube channel, and and doing my marathon as well, which is going to be interesting. It's absolutely destroying me, the training for that right now.
Please tell people where they can get involved if they don't mind the marathon, because I think what you're doing is incredible. And I think with cancer research, and again, that illness has affected so many people, it's quite nice to end on something like that. It's so good-hearted and good-natured. And to be fair, the support you've had has been unbelievable, got to say. And I think that shows you the amount of love there is for you, not only in the Spurs fan base, but in general. I mean, it must be amazing to have had that support. And that's putting more pressure on the training now, which I know people could be tracking you, seeing you how you're getting on in your training these days.
Honestly, it has. It's put on so much pressure. I'm like, I think I've done something like 118 miles worth of runs so far, and that's purely because when you've got like people have donated almost 17 grand towards it already. It's just mad,
it's remarkable,
and it's put so much pressure on me to do it that I'm actually kind of destroying my body in the process. But yeah, anyone else that's very kind enough to want to donate, it's pinned to the top of my Twitter page. You can go there on the and donate away, and hopefully I get to next year, and I'm able to get to the finish line. I kind of have to now, even if I crawl across it.
And if you're like me, Ali, that's come off of Twitter or X or whatever, then how do I get onto it?
That's a great question. Let me just have a quickly look at the actual web page itself, which is easy. It's just giving one or something. It is a justgiving.com Alasdair Gold one. If you search me on there, you'll find me, and it's going well, but my body doesn't feel that way.
Mate, you're looking amazing. Thank you so much for all your support. You're an absolute star. And you'll find also that link in our audio description and YouTube description below if you'd like to continue to donate to Ali. Bless him. He's doing a wonderful, I've got to say, for that, like I say, for that illness and how it's affected so many people's lives, it's a lovely thing to give back.
When is it, Ali?
5 seconds. 5 seconds. Hang on. I'm just coming away. I need to do something.
When's the marathon, Ali?
And I'm back.
Next April.
Let me put a hat on to Alasdair to take it off to him for doing what he's doing and raising that sort of money for cancer charity. Well done.
Unbelievable. It really is. Again, guys, thank you so much for your support. We'll be catching up with Ali, hopefully in the new year, and we'll see where Spurs are at and whether things have changed. But like I will say, the world out there is not always a happy, lovely place. But like I say, to close it on that kind of thing, just a reminder that there's good people doing good things out there. And if we can treat everybody better, that'll be great. I want to say a massive thank you to Jason, to Cracks, to Ricky, to the wonderful Alasdair Gold. Guys, have been the last one on Spurs. Thanks so much for all your support. Jason McGovern, my man, thank you. Like I say, keep safe, keep well. And as always, come on you Spurs.